So this was a very long time coming, you guys. Yu Yu Hakusho is something that is so incredibly close to my heart. I watched this show when it first premiered on Adult Swim in the US, and yes, lots of fans forget that this was actually an Adult Swim show before it was on Toonami. It was uncut, and it hit me in a very perfect time in my life. See, I was 14 years old, the exact same age as the protagonist Yusuke Urameshi, who inspired me and exemplified everything that I wished I could be at that age, but wasn't. I followed the show to its conclusion, and it's safe to say that there is nothing like Yu Yu Hakusho out there. Sure, there is plenty of shonen series with big bads and power-ups and all that, but the way that Yu Yu Hakusho went about its story, and even more so than that, the absolute relatability and unique characters and their interactions, and everything there that was presented has to this day left an impact on me. But despite this being an anime that I give incredibly high praise to, I actually have never read the manga until now. So keep in mind this video is a review of the manga specifically and not the anime, and I'll try to keep it as spoiler free as I possibly can. First of all, credit where credit is due. The fact that Yoshihiro Togashi created both this and Hunter x Hunter is an incredible feat of writing skill, and no one can take away his godly status for achieving that. Togashi's art style admittedly might not be for everybody, but his storytelling talent is something that shines through the pages, regardless of if the artwork hits for you or not. And I'll be honest, I like his art style, but starting Yu Yu Hakusho in the manga form, it was very interesting because as the beginning of this manga, the characters are depicted in a very old school style of manga, a little more cartoony than I was expecting, and it kind of reminded me of something like Astro Boy or Alita Battle Angel. And that's not a negative at all, but after being so used to the animation style of the anime, which is much more of that hard-angled shonen style that you were used to from the 90s, the manga took a little bit of time for me to get adjusting to. Now, what exactly is Yu Yu Hakusho, if you've never seen it before, never read it before? Basically, Yu Yu Hakusho translates to something along the lines of ghost or poltergeist cases or files, something like that, essentially referencing the profession of the protagonist becoming a spirit detective. And forgive me if I use a lot of the anime terminology as opposed to the manga, it's just what I'm used to. In the very beginning of the series, we meet our main character Yusuke Urameshi. He's a teenage punk who has a rebellious nature, skips school, doesn't care for authority, and just says whatever he wants. And like I said, when I was 14, Yusuke was who I wished I was. Just being able to tell teachers to screw off and being strong enough to back it all up. But despite having this tough guy persona, Yusuke doesn't wish harm upon anybody. Other than those who challenge him, of course. And in the very beginning of this story, he jumps in front of a speeding car to save a small boy from getting hit, resulting in his own death. This causes him to turn into a ghost, and he meets the Grim Reaper, who turns out to be an adorable girl named Botan, which I continuously cross my fingers that if I ever die, that the Grim Reaper is this adorable. But after a few ordeals he goes through to win his life back, Yusuke eventually agrees to become a spirit detective for those of the spirit realm, essentially meaning that it's his job to track down demonic criminals and bring them to justice, putting his skills for fighting to good use, and Yusuke's taking no bullshit attitude applies greatly into how he handles his cases. From this foundation, the series consistently builds and turns what was a simple concept into more and more complex situations as Yusuke is forced to fight for his life, gain more power and experience, and learn the value of what he truly wants out of life. Yusuke also grew up without a father figure, and that definitely plays into what he thinks and feels when he comes across powerful men throughout the series, and what those men did to achieve that power. He sees how some rise to great heights, but also because they lost a piece of themselves along the way, and he sees the darkest depths of the lows that they can bring themselves to, all the while immersed within incredible action scenarios. When regarding the manga specifically, there is a number of differences from the series. The first that stands out is that there are a lot more chapters with Yusuke as a ghost before he returns to life and becomes the spirit detective. I can understand why the anime skipped these chapters to get into the action stuff a lot quicker. Hell, it only takes about 6 to 7 episodes in the anime, and some people still complain about it being too slow in the beginning. I never thought it was slow. To me, it was all character building episodes, which was very important. Not to mention, when I first watched the anime, I had to wait an entire week for one episode. So yeah, it was a lot more than the action that drew me in. I was really attached to these characters. But anyway, in the manga, Yusuke is basically doing things as a ghost to increase his good karma to help him come back to life. And there are a lot of one-chapter missions that he goes on, and some are surprisingly very wholesome. There's one with an old man nearing death who misses his son, and Yusuke helps ease his mind in his last hours, and honestly, it almost brought a tear to my eye. It was so good. There's another where he helps a ghost girl who refuses to pass on to the next world. The design for said ghost girl was actually used in the anime, but for a completely different character. And I'll say that if you had no idea this was going to be an action series, these first few chapters will give you a very different perception of what this series would wind up being. But as for me, who already knows the anime back and forth, I wasn't in any particular hurry to get to the action stuff, so I really appreciated these early chapters a lot more, I feel like. It was basically new content for me that I'd never got to see before, and I was all for it. But I can also understand if this part isn't for everybody, as in the manga it takes almost a full 20 chapters before the ball really gets rolling. From there, the manga pretty much follows the anime, so for me it was just cool being able to read it from a different medium. This series relies fully on its varied cast of characters. Now, I've mentioned Yusuke quite a bit, but he is also only one piece of the puzzle. We also have Kuwabara, and you guys, I fucking love Kuwabara. He is also a kid that goes to Yusuke's school and constantly challenges him to fights, which he never wins. But Kuwabara is kind of like one of those gentle giant type characters. He has a code of honor that he follows, he's loyal as hell to his friends, and he's, at least from a mindset point of view, a little bit more of what your typical hero would be. The problem is that he is extremely reckless and often facing opponents that are way stronger than he is. But he absolutely refuses to give up and does manage to have a few of the better moments within the story. But he is also often used as the butt of a joke as well. Keiko serves as the love interest for Yusuke and is pretty much his opposite. The good girl does her schoolwork, has her life planned ahead of her, but her and Yusuke have been friends since childhood, so she has kind of a built-in nurturing and attachment vibe for him. And honestly, Keiko is like the prime example of a quality woman. Loyal as all hell, supportive, nurturing, comforting, always has his back, always rooting for him, and she's not afraid to throw down when the situation calls for it either. I mentioned Botan a little bit. She's the Grim Reaper, but also serves as somebody to help educate and inform Yusuke on his missions. Kurama is an absolute badass. Once a legendary fox demon, he escaped to the human world on the verge of death and basically inhabited the womb of a human woman, only to be reborn in a human body. But while living life as a human for so many years, he grows an appreciation for them, so he's basically this balance between a caring individual and an absolute cutthroat monster when he needs to be. His abilities are also some of the best, being able to control and manipulate plant life. A simple rose can become a thorned whip for him, or he can just plant a seed inside you, feed it with his energy, and have it bloom and explode out of your body from the inside. Yeah, don't get on his bad side. Hiei is also a great character, a full-blooded demon, and the thing that I love about Hiei, besides his just general badassery, is that Hiei never really becomes a good guy, at least not in the traditional sense. He is first an enemy of Yusuke and then is forced into several team-ups with him, but he always retains his demonic nature. He does gain some respect for Yusuke and the team, but he's often just doing his own thing, and I really like how they didn't pull a Vegeta with him and just turned him good over time. No, Hiei is always a demon to the end, but for him it's a matter of what he finds important, one of those things being his estranged sister. Genkai is an old psychic who winds up being a trainer of Yusuke's, and her story is also incredible as it unfolds. You know that she has been through some horrible shit within her lifetime, to the point where it comes time to pass down her legacy, she barely cares if the person receiving it is good or evil. Her connection to Yusuke and even one of the antagonists really helps her character feel more complex, along with the concept of the spirit wave, and if she powers up to a particular point, it helps her cells remember when she was at her strongest, and she momentarily de-ages as the energy revitalizes her. The core concept is actually really fascinating, as there is some science that supports that a feeling can make our bodies believe that we are re-experiencing something that we already have. I don't know, it gets kind of deep and I'm not going to get into that in this video, but yeah, Genkai's awesome. What I do have to talk about though are the antagonists. Togashi, nobody writes antagonists like him. Sure, I don't necessarily think that they hit the peak of Meruem from Hunter x Hunter, but the mere fact that Togashi can write so many top-tier villains in his stories is unparalleled. Yu Yu Hakusho itself has two of my favorite villains in all of anime and manga with Toguro and Sensui. Toguro is an extremely jacked, never skips leg day, Arnold Schwarzenegger looking motherfucker that pushes Yusuke to his absolute limits. As well as Toguro, through fully embracing his demonic power, seems to have a deep longing within him that he's trying to uncover through Yusuke's process. He's the main antagonist of the Dark Tournament arc, and even if you haven't experienced Yu Yu Hakusho for yourself, you're probably at least aware that it has one of the best tournament arcs in Shonen, and yeah, it really does. Every round, every match, pits Yusuke's team up against some of the fiercest opponents that the Demon World has to offer, all leading to the final confrontation between Yusuke and Toguro. And as the tournament takes about a third of the entire series and is by far the longest arc, the final confrontation absolutely delivers and ends in a spectacular way, learning even more about Togoro's past than you ever expected you would. The next arc is called Chapter Black, and Togashi somehow follows up the tournament stuff with an arc that is, in my opinion, even better. Chapter Black introduces more concepts of humans gaining powers and abilities that work in intricate ways that aren't just about strength boosts and energy blasts, and I feel like it was here that you can kind of look at it as the beginning example of what Hunter x Hunter's Nen system would eventually become. He also somehow creates an antagonist just as good, if not better than Toguro, with Sensui, a human who is determined to open the barrier between the human and demon worlds and exterminate humanity as a whole. Deeply troubled and full of trauma, Sensui's broken mind causes him to go to the most extremes, and yet presenting examples as to why humanity probably should go extinct, and I can't help but think that he does have some very compelling arguments along the way. But then we get to the final arc, and oh man, look, just because I love this series doesn't mean that I won't be critical about it, about the things that I didn't like, and it's no secret that the final arc of Yu Yu Hakusho was rushed. In the anime you can tell that it was, but the anime version of the final arc fleshes out a lot of material, and I actually really enjoyed it. I think the anime saved the final arc of this manga because the manga version is straight up just not good. Now look, I'm not placing the blame on Togashi, I'm just saying that as a consumer and while reading it, it misses the mark big time. The art drops severely in quality, and while building up to the battle between Yusuke and a demonic force known as Yomi, it cuts away and the next chapter takes place much later. Basically, it was dropped mid-arc and the resolution is told to us all through exposition, also allowing Togashi to use less drawings and he begins his walls of text. Similar to how recent Hunter x Hunter chapters are, which lead me to even further believe that Hunter x Hunter will probably not be finished. The final episode of the anime is really fantastic and leaves you with a good optimistic feeling, and the final chapters of the manga, not so much. It just feels so abrupt and weird, like dozens of concepts were suddenly abandoned. Now Togashi has several quotes about the ending of Yu Yu Hakusho, one of them being, "If I'm honest, I'm feeling a great relief and pleasure at the thought that I've finally been able to finish Yu Yu Hakusho. It's not that I've lost all emotional attachment to the work, but I feel that my stress level has greatly surpassed my will to work. The 6 months leading up to the concluding chapter felt awfully long to me. To tell the truth, it had already been decided that Yu Yu Hakusho was going to end in December of '93. Or rather, this was a decision that I had forced on the editorial staff. There were many reasons for this, all in all, about 50 big ones and 50 small ones. But in broad strokes, these are my major reasons. Number 1, my body. Number 2, thoughts I had about what it means to draw a manga. And 3, desire to do other things than work. Point 3 is out of the question for a professional manga writer. Basically, I wanted to indulge in my hobbies, rest, and sleep as much as I could. Now, I can completely understand and sympathize with these reasonings. He gave himself a deadline and finished it in any way that he could. And I also find it interesting that he also said, quote, "It saddens me to say this, but I had explored every possible direction for the Yu Yu Hakusho characters that I could in the context of a professional publication. All I could do at this point was start deconstructing the characters or go on repeating the same storylines over and over until the readers just got bored. My attempts to deconstruct the characters were of course turned down by Shonen Jump. I didn't have the strength physically or mentally to keep doing the same thing over and over." Now I find this quote very fascinating because when he started Hunter x Hunter, its very core concepts come from it being a deconstruction of shonen tropes and characters. What do I mean by that? Well, in Hunter x Hunter, he has the joyful protag of Gon kind of show just how dangerous being reckless like that can be, when usually it's shown as a positive thing in other manga. Villains don't get defeated by the main protagonists, you start to root for the villains. things are very less black and white. All ideas that you can sense that are within Yu Yu Hakusho, but become fully realized in Hunter x Hunter. So I'll say this, when talking about the manga, I still very much prefer the anime version when it comes to this series. I think it fleshes out things better that are left more vague, and it does the ending better, and I just prefer to experience it with the music, voice acting, and energy that comes from animation. So I would say that unless manga is your preferred way to consume this kind of material, then just watch the anime. But if you're already an anime fan, I would say the manga is definitely worth checking out. It's fun to see the humble beginnings of what this series was, the ghost adventures of Yusuke, the old school drawing vibes, and the way that you can feel Togashi really creating something unique and special here. Anyways guys, if you have read the Yu Yu Hakusho manga, what are your thoughts about it? If you've only seen the anime, do you have any interest in checking the manga out? Please leave all thoughts and comments down below. Also, please like the video and subscribe if you want to stick around and see some more. And if you're feeling really frisky and want to support the channel on that extra level, I do have a Patreon and merch store in the description below, along with all my various social medias that you can follow. Other than that, guys, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you next time.